Another fundamental concept of D3 that we're going to need and use frequently throughout the rest of the course is called scales. A scale is simply a function that maps the extent of your data to a pixel value on the screen. So it takes in one number, which is the data point, which might be, say, population or meters or any other data unit in any number, and it's going to map that onto pixels so that our data stays within the screen and it doesn't overflow the boundaries that we have available. D3 provides a number of different scale functions. You can do a logarithmic scale or a square root scale, but to start off, we're going to stick with the simplest one, which is a linear scale. So the scale function needs two main things. The first thing is a domain, which is the input to the scale, and the second is the range, which is the output of the scale. So for the domain, we're going to pass an array, which is going to represent the minimum and maximum numbers that we are allowed to take into the scale. So we're going to go from 0, and oftentimes we will do this and use this maximum function from D3 to go to the maximum value in our data. And that's a great way to make sure that if you have dynamic data coming in, like from an API or data that is frequently changing, that it is never going to overflow your screen. So whatever the maximum value of the data is, it's going to map that to the widest part of the chart or the tallest part of the chart, and your data will always fit in the space that you have available. So we will take the maximum of our data, which is just an array, so we can just pass that in there. You also have the option to pass a callback function to this if, say, you had an array of objects, but we just have a simple array, so we just pass that in. And for range, we are going to go from 0 to width, which is a built-in variable and observable, which represents the width of our page here. So that's never going to be wider than this width that we have available. Now that we have our scale set up, we can use that to create a visualization. So we have our scale function set up, and we will come down here and we will select our SVG again, and let's do another selection. And we're going to select all of the rectangles that are within the SVG. Then we are going to use the data method to compare the data elements in our array to our selection of rectangles. And we will use the enter method to say, create a new rectangle for every data point they have coming in, for which there is not already a rectangle available. So we're going to use the enter method, and then we're going to tell it to append a new rectangle every time you find that comparison where you have a new data point coming in and there's no rectangle, add a new rectangle. And we're going to give each rectangle a set of attributes. So rectangles need 4 different attributes to appear on the screen. They need the x, the y, the width, and the height. And then you can also pass a fill value to change the color. So let's set the x position of the rectangle. We're going to set that to 10. So we're going to create a horizontal bar chart here where all of our rectangles are lined up 10 pixels from the edge. And then we will make a second attribute here for the y position. And that one is going to be a callback function. So this callback function is going to take our data point, and it's going to take the index of that in the array. And we're going to just, again, keep this simple and set it based on the index. So we're going to do I times 10, which means we're going to space these 10 pixels apart. And we're going to add a little bit of padding here at the start. And then we'll make another attribute here for the width of the rectangle. So since this is a horizontal bar chart, the width is what's going to really represent the data. So that's where we're going to need our x scale to come in. So we will take that x scale. So it's a function, so we can call it like a regular JavaScript function. And the argument to that function is going to be our data point. So we're going to pass in that data number that we want into the scale, and it's going to output a value between 0 and the width for what the width of our rectangle is going to be to represent the data. And then each rectangle, we want that to be 8 pixels tall. So they're all going to be the same height. And we want each rectangle to be blue. So we'll make that a nice blue color. And then we can go ahead and run that. And there's our bar chart. And we see because we use a scale, even though we might have data values that are longer than the number of pixels we have here, because we use a scale, we remap that value onto the space that we have available. So these bars don't overflow the screen. They just fit nicely within the provided space.